Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Changing Face of Mining. I am your host, Peggy Bell, Chief Growth Officer of the Femina Collective, and I am super excited today to have the Women's Mining Coalition with me. Before we start off, I am joining you from the Michi-Saigig Anishinaabe traditional lands, otherwise known as Peterborough, Ontario. And today I just want to talk about some of the differences in words that we might be using during today's episode. I will be using the term Indigenous. My guests may be using other terms, including the word tribal. So I just wanted to let the audience know that these are the words that we have been that have been deemed acceptable and of use in our own specific countries, and that will be the way that we discuss these things today. So I'm super excited because I met Lindsay and Emily at SME last year. Lindsay and I have managed to get on a call or two together, and we had lunch over that conference, which was lovely. And it was the first time I even learned about the Women's Mining Coalition. Well, actually, I had known about it first. I just thought it was the same thing as WIM. So it was nice to know that that they are actually not the same thing. And I met Emily. I was having coffee with a friend, and I kind of bombed into their discussion and got to meet her that way. But Cherie, this is the first time that we've met, and I'm super excited about that. So I will let you introduce yourself. So start with Lindsay because she's in the top part of the corner of my screen, and we'll go next to Cherie and then Emily.
Thanks, Peggy. Yes, I'm Lindsay Wright. I am the Executive Director of the Women's Mining Coalition. I live in Reno, Nevada, originally from Texas. I got into the mining industry about 6-7 years ago and probably won't ever leave. But
good. We like having you.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
My name is Cherie Leeden, and I'm originally from Perth, Western Australia, but I'm now a proud American and reside in Incline Village, Nevada. And I'm an exploration geologist by background, and I specialize in creating new startup companies in the exploration sector that then hopefully go on to become mines and bigger companies. And I've been doing that for about 23 years.
Wonderful. Cherie, I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. I should have confirmed that. Apologies. Emily?
I'm Emily Hendrickson. I'm the current president of the Women's Mining Coalition, coming to you today from the traditional contemporary territories of the Shoshone, Paiute, and Bannock peoples, also known as Boise, Idaho. And by day, I am the manager of external affairs here in the U.S. for Integra Resources, and we are just recently became a producer, which is very exciting, but also developing gold silver projects in the Great Basin of the Western U.S.
Wonderful. Congratulations. That's a lot to become a gold and silver producer. So a lot of work, a lot of work goes into that. So we'll go in the opposite direction. Emily, I'll start with you. What does responsible mining and advocacy mean to you?
Yeah. So, I joke because several years ago, I did kind of an I Am Mining type of video for the Nevada Mining Association. And I referred to myself as a self-proclaimed tree hugger, and that has kind of followed me. And it's true, I'm from originally Western Oregon, and mining was not at all on my radar. It's not a thing there. We have timber and logging. But just by way of recession and all of that good stuff, my whole family really got into mining, and it truly changed the course of our lives. Mm-hmm. And I saw what that could do for not only my family, but then I got into the world of kind of community engagement and was able to see what that can do for real people here in the US and communities. And so, for me, responsible mining means, all the things that we say about how, we need all of these materials and we can do that responsibly here in North America. But it means kind of being part of the solution. I think, just kind of my background and where I came from, I very easily could have gone maybe the NGO path and really just kind of focus on stopping projects. But I kind of was like, okay, well, let me infiltrate this and understand it from within and be kind of one of those drivers for holding the industry accountable and making sure it's doing the right thing. And I'm so glad I took that perspective because I've been, kind of surprised in a lot of ways and very encouraged by what this industry can do. And that story is important.
I don't think that's an uncommon way of people getting into mining. I know that I've talked to numerous people, myself included, growing up to be like through being an environmentalist and what does that mean? And now realizing that the potential that mining has when done responsibly and how much it is needed in that energy transition. So I think that is a I wouldn't say common, but not uncommon.
Yeah, I hear it a lot
either. Yeah. Cherie, what about you?
Yes, so similarly, I'll just add to Emily's that we all know that mining is essential to our way of life, but a lot of people are totally unaware that they're using mine products every day. So for me, it's just kind of a real opportunity to essentially just help educate the general public with respect to where stuff comes from, because so many people that are opposed to mining have no idea how many minerals that are mined are in their EV or in their cell phone. And I think that's largely because of education and largely because of government perception and public perception. And, with government spending and with government support, perception of the public changes. So for me, that's why I'm involved in advocacy, because I think it's a real opportunity to be doing mining in a more responsible manner, as is being done currently in the US. And, we have been burdened with the scars of mining industry over the last 200 years, the ugly holes in the ground. And it's not how we leave things now, but that's what the public sees. And when you're not in our sector, you just think big, ugly hole in the ground that's really destroyed the environment. So just really changing the perception and educating the public of how we do it now is why I like being involved with WMC.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah. I'll go next. And I'll echo what Emily has said, because she's right on point. And especially for the Women's Mining Coalition, we are nonpartisan, and so all ideas, we want to bring everything together, and we need to hear both sides of the Emily comes from a different perspective, Cherie, myself, and so I think that is the part of responsible, not just looking at it from one view, but all views, and then trying to find solutions and be a part of that, be a part of the solutions, and not necessarily constantly fighting against one side or the other. So
yeah, and
sorry, Lindsay. I think that's the beauty of the Women's Mining Coalition, is that we are many voices, and that's that kind of grassroots coalition perspective versus maybe other advocacy organizations that kind of do become maybe more beholden to some of their bigger corporate sponsors or things like that. We are very much just the people who show up to the fly-in. Like, that's the story of mining that you hear.
Oh, and that's such a, it really is like the story of mining in general, right? Is that ultimately we are a very global industry in that we have these large global players, but we operate in a very local way. Mm-hmm. And each community is different. Each indigenous nation is different. Each modern nation is different. And all of that really tells a different story than what you might get from other places, or other industries. Is that localized piece that we spend most of our time in, not necessarily in the larger side of it. So one of the things that I learned when I was in the US is it's a very different market. I thought it was super interesting that I could go to a conference in Australia or the UK and know a ton of people. And I went to the US and I didn't know anybody, which to me was fascinating. But also there's a lot of different organizations. So you do have WIM, you have WMC, and then you also have these state organizations. And so understanding and learning how an organization or somebody like me would move through that was really fascinating. And so what is the difference between the state organizations and WMC, and how does that function within the US mining sphere?
I can start with that one. So technically the difference, when you look at the IRS, we are a 501c4. Other state associations and the national organizations are a 501c6, which is they can lobby, right? We, as Emily just said, we're many voices, right? And the goal of going to DC is to tell our story, right? And so when I go to DC in my first fly-in, we were talking about, grid reliability, right? Making sure that we have power. And I will tell a story about how it's important and it affects people because of, when the failure of ERCOT. I'm from Texas. My family lives in Texas. My entire family lost power during the middle of the winter for a week. And my sister was sleeping in her car with her 1-year-old child, right? So you tell these stories and it kind of brings together the importance. And that is, I think, the difference in what we do when you're talking about the state level. If you are not involved in your state associations, you absolutely should be. We have some wonderful people. Deantha Skabinski in Alaska, Julie Lucas in Minnesota. I'm sure everyone knows Julie. We love her. She's a WMC member as well. But they are doing it at the state level, and for us, it's much more broad, if you will. Things that they affect the entire country, not necessarily just state specific.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add that we work very, very closely with all. There are a lot of advocacy organizations, SME, AEMA, National Mining Association, and then all the state agencies, Mining and Metallurgical Society of America, right? Like there are a lot of different kind of players in the game, but that, and to Cherie, a point, that you've made, that was kind of born out of necessity. And I'll let you kind of take that message, but I think it's important to note that we kind of provide that sort of boutique approach to advocacy, and we're maybe able to get the attention of decision makers that, maybe other groups or lobbyists that folks are used to seeing in the halls of Congress all the time don't get that same level of kind of attention. And we're able to really kind of take a targeted approach that way.
Yeah, your observation is spot on, Peggy. I had the same observation when I relocated to the US about a decade ago. I'm a member of about 6 organizations, and it's just US organizations. So I've found that they all provide a very niche focus, and they're all essentially essential, and most of them play very nicely together. So when you're going to the government, you'll be a member of half a dozen coalitions, and you'll have the backing of all those people and all those members. So in Nevada alone, I'm a member of the Nevada Mining Association, the Nevada Exploration Mining Coalition, the Geological Society of Nevada. It goes on and on and on. And then when there's an issue at the state or federal level, you've got a lot of friends to help support you and come together. And there has been a lot of opposition in general to mining in the United States, and perhaps that's one reason why there are so many organizations and different organizations, because an exploration coalition is trying to protect the explorers, whereas a mining coalition is looking out for the bottom dollar of the mines, and they don't always have the exploration companies at heart. So again, it's kind of a complex little intertwined webs, but I really do see them working and collaborating really well together.
Oh yeah, that leads to my next question, is because we often, I'm trying to put this in the nicest way possible. How do you balance the needs of industries that are under such pressure from the energy transition, or maybe even your own personal beliefs where you maybe need to put more money into one sector versus the other? How do you keep that neutralized view? Is it listening to the stories and understanding that point of view? Because I feel in general that's a really beneficial skill to have, right? That ability to balance and listen and approach things that way.
When it comes to the WMC, I think that, again, it's we're very honest about, we're many voices, right? We are citizen advocates. We tell our stories. And so we're not necessarily run by big corporations. We have a lot of exploration companies that support our organization, and we have a lot of individual members. So Emily, when she goes to fly-in, she is Emily Hendrickson. I live in Boise, Idaho. I'm a miner, right? She doesn't speak on behalf of Integra, although that may get intertwined in her story, if you will, in her experiences. But at the end of the day, she's there to talk about from her perspective, and then Cherie has a very different one, right? So I think that being very honest about the fact that we have different perspectives, and we're not necessarily pushed by any sort of organization to speak in a specific way, then that actually works to our benefit, right? I think it helps people to want to be more involved, because you come from coal and I come from lithium, but yet we can still have great conversation. It also helps to breed really good conversation. I don't know how many times I've talked to Cherie and Emily, and we just start jibing about things, and you learn something new. I don't know if she's on the call today, but Emily Arthen, she's the CEO of the American Coal Council, and she's also one of our members. She is one of my predecessors, and she is amazing, and her knowledge of the coal sector is, so I've learned so much from her, and it sort of opens your eyes to the industry as a whole. And I think that goes back to Cherie's point earlier, that education is a key part of, you have to want to be educated to be a part of one of these organizations, at least for ours, I think. And so, but we're not really driven by, big corporations and their, prerogatives, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and I'm very vocal about that. And, as the director,
Yeah.
I hope people understand that, because we want to hear from individuals and what their perspectives are. So.
Right.
And when we meet the politicians in DC, Peggy, we portray ourselves as a fact-checking information organization. And we're a resource to politicians, because unfortunately there is no Bureau of Mines any longer in the United States. So sometimes politicians just don't know where to go to get data. Like, is this organization giving them real data, or is this, NGO giving them real data? What do they believe? So we really pride ourselves in being an organization that they could basically give us a question and we can do our research if we don't know from the top of our head, and then give them back an answer that's based on facts.
Yeah.
For myself, where I come from and my value system, like, it's kind of always doing that balance of, do I feel like I'm leading with integrity in the projects I'm working on or projects I'm advocating for? And then, kind of compounded with, I do this work with communities, and I'm very much a community engagement specialist, and I work closely with tribal nations, and hearing those perspectives, I have a responsibility to carry that through, when we go to DC or when my company is making decisions. Like, I don't have the pleasure of like, like, that's important to you, but here's what we want to do. Like, I just personally can't. And so I feel very fortunate to work in this industry that's kind of always keeping me maybe more balanced, whereas, I might sway otherwise towards one side of the coin or the other. And if Emily Arthen is on the call, she might kill me. But my first fly-in, I was very anxious about speaking to any coal issues. Yeah. We absolutely have members from the coal industry, great companies supporting us. Obviously, folks like Emily and Wendy Hutchison and others. And my first fly-in, I'm like, that's not my thing. I don't know enough about it, first of all, to speak to it. And we do training sessions and things, but my perspective on coal has absolutely changed from, first meeting the people working in coal, the good people who are doing right by, the environment and communities. And then also just understanding the bigger picture and having those hard conversations with myself about the energy transition and grid reliability. And it's not an on-off switch.
No.
For me, at least with coal in the US, the thing that's really struck me is, they're not out here just, fighting to the last breath to build more coal power plants and more coal. It's delaying these retirements and making this a true transition and supporting the grid while we're doing it, while our energy needs are only increasing.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent perspective to have, and something that's quite introspective. And I'm a big advocate of leaders having that introspective ability, because things are never black and white. It's always various layers of shade of gray. And we certainly go through that in Canada with bitumen and the mineral sands, and how are we going to transition, and what does that mean for, entire provinces really to replace their primary source of income, and how does mining come into that, and what does that transition look like? So I think that's a wonderful perspective. But on that, we're talking about misconceptions about different industries, different governments, and how do you find education to be? Because even amongst ourselves, the four of us, we were talking about. I was chuckling at some misconceptions that the U.S. might have about Canadian mining, and same thing here is that definitely having misconceptions about the U.S. mining, because I do find that even within our own sector, we are quite siloed between geographies, whether that's US, Canada, Australia, Africa. Like, how do you educate those misconceptions, and what are some of the ones that you've seen?
I can try that one. So WMC is nonpartisan, so we're not on either side. However, there's generally a perception in the United States that Democrats are anti-mining, and Republicans pro-mining, drill baby drill. And I'd just like to say that there's also support from a lot of Democrats for our sector. And there's also some Republicans that hate mining. So you can't really generalize and make these sweeping statements. Nevada, for example, we have two very supportive Democratic senators. We also have probably even more so supportive Republican congressman and governor. So it's a state where bipartisan politics is working, and our industry is essentially moving forward. We've had a recent mine approved in record time, the Ioneers Rhyolite Ridge mine, and that had an endangered species, and that company bent over backwards to essentially work out a solution for that problem, and worked with all of the state and federal levels. And I'm not involved with that project at all, but I just thought, wow, if a project with a problem like that can overcome and create solutions within an 8-year period, that's a real positive reflection for permitting in the United States. And I think that's the biggest one that's been permitted recently. And it's a real credit to everyone involved that these things are getting permitted. And again, that's with bipartisan support in a state that's blue and red.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the misconceptions, honestly, and I'll put it back on the industry, it comes to trust. There's kind of a story that's been shared around the industry. There was a interagency working group on mining reform that was formed out of the federal government, and they were tasked with putting together a report on how to basically deal with mining in the U.S., how to move forward. And after they published that report, they visited a mine site for the first time in Nevada, which was funny. But one of the comments that was made was, well, why did you decide to put the mine here? And everyone on the mining side is like biting their tongue, like, oh my gosh, like the minerals are located where they are located.
Yeah.
Choose that, right? And sometimes that's located right next to a community. Sometimes it's incredibly far away from anything. And so I think, what the industry has done a much better job of is kind of going from that, tell me about it, like we talk about, we try to educate folks about this industry, but it only means so much when you're sitting in an office or oftentimes a hallway or a closet in DC having these meetings. And it's a totally different experience when you visit the mine itself. So it's going from that tell me to show me. And I think where the opportunity still exists for mining is to take it to that next level of involve me. And, that comes from things like citizen science and engagement in planning processes and very early on in the development of a project in the exploration phase. But I think it's always lived in this black box. It's been something that has tried to fly under the radar for a long time. And, COVID and the supply chain really kind of brought it to the forefront. And I think there's a real opportunity for mining right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. And so, what those fly-ins, tell me more about those, because those sound like they might be fun. And what do you get to do in that?
I'll start with this one, and then I can let Emily and Cherie kind of give their perspectives on fly-in. So I've been a part of the Women's Mining Coalition for 5 years now, and my first 3 years were during COVID, and we did not have fly-ins. We were doing local, state level webinars with politicians at the state level. So that was really successful. We actually really enjoyed that. And it has helped our organization to be involved in webinars and things like this to get involved and engaged. But we do a fly-in once a year to DC. We take a group. This past couple of years, we've taken about 35 women, and we set up meetings with across the hill with members of Congress who sit on committees that are related or associated with creating legislation related to mining. And so we visit with these offices, Republican and Democrat, and basically talk to them about what's going on in the industry. If there is legislation that might be pose challenges to the mining industry, we discuss those. One thing I've recognized in the last couple of years, though, is that they're not even issues. We call them issue papers or things we talk about. They're more broad, again, that affect the nation, and we're talking about things like the Mining Schools Act, right? That has nothing to do with permitting or anything, but it's super important to our industry. And so but we go into these offices and we discuss what's going on. I know with Cherie, we've sat in offices with Senator Rosen's team before and talked about that sometimes goes to more Nevada based because she and I are both in Nevada, but it also turns into a conversation about data. Senator Rosen is very into data and information. And when you can sort of key in on those things and you find solutions, especially when she's considered unfriendly to mining, which she is not. And so these conversations you have in DC, they really turn out to conversations like this. You're not necessarily going in to say mining is good and we're fighting for something, but it's to have these conversations and open people's mind a little bit. So
yeah. So for those who might ever think about joining us in DC. And Peggy, you are welcome. We have had Canadians before. We would love to have you. Yes, please come. It's always in the spring, so it's a beautiful time in DC. We always try to plan it towards the end of the Cherry Blossom Festival, so you can still see them, but it's not so busy. And we plan around the congressional schedule and all of that good stuff. And what it looks like is we have always kind of a half-day training. So I was 22 when I went to my first fly-in and was totally out of my element. And by the end of that half-day training and a couple of the first meetings under my belt, it was like, boom, we got it. We provide all the information, all the information on bill numbers and all of that good stuff. But again, we're not lobbyists, and that's what we kind of lead with. And to Cherie's point, we're just here to provide information and to share our stories. And so often what I've seen in these meetings is the most powerful voices are those of, one time I brought a heap leach pad operator to the fly-in, and the members and staffers didn't want to hear from any of us government affairs folks or whatever. They wanted to hear from that real person, or single moms who were able to put their kids through college because of their job in the mining industry. And so that's always really, really powerful. And you're always in a group of women, no one's ever in a meeting on their own. We try and put folks into, these members really care about meeting with their constituents. So we try and, Lindsay is the schedule master and really tries to make sure folks are where they'll be the most effective. And it's, you take a different perspective to different offices. One meeting that always sticks out in my mind, we were meeting with a congresswoman's office from San Francisco, and we actually fell into a really great alignment on NEPA, so kind of permitting reform in the US. They were trying to permit a homeless shelter and had to go through the NEPA process. And it was kind of their first experience with like, wow, this is really arduous and like kind of doesn't make sense. And so you just find those ways to connect, and it's a really cool experience.
I love that.
Yeah, Lindsay tries to cram in as many meetings as she can in a 3 to 4 day period, and we meet everyone from senators to congressmen to the lowest level students training people in the room. So we might have a meeting scheduled, and a senator has an important meeting, and the only one left in the office is a student. But we find those meetings just as important, because it's really like where you form your formative views at that age, and just to essentially share our stories and where we're coming from, why we're in DC, what we're doing there. So every meeting's of value.
Oh, I love educating students. High schools are my favorite for sure. That's anytime I can get a chance to talk to anybody, I always think that's so much fun, and I would love to join. So you're going to have to keep me posted on that.
And nighttime, we go to ball games, we go to concerts.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah. We do try and have fun. I will say this: this past year we were so lucky to have, her name is Jennifer Riley. She is a student recruiter from the Mackey School at UNR, and she was able to find students to come to DC with us this year. Because of their school schedule, they weren't able to be there all week, but they were there for a day. And I run into one of the students at the monthly SME meetings here at the local chapter, and she's doing her PhD, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful networking as well. I will say that. I met Cherie that's how I met Cherie, in the halls of, I don't know which Senate building it was. Cherie and I were partnered for offices for the afternoon, and I walked up to her and I was like, "Hi, I'm Lindsay," and that we've been great friends ever since. I went and had dinner with her and her wife in Klein Village like 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? So it's this great networking community of men and women. We are not exclusive. We are very inclusive of everyone to join, and we have had men join us on the fly-in before. And so if there are any men listening to the live today, please feel free to join us. We would love to have you. So
yeah, I think that's to your point around that. I think that when women come together, we can do really amazing things, and then when we have men that support us as well, things just go even that much further. It's but I do enjoy my time with the collective members and people that join us, whether it's at PDAC, who don't know about us and are joining for the first time. I always think it's such a magical experience whenever you get a ton of us in the room talking about these things. So just, one more question, which I didn't give you the heads up on. So, but yeah, I know but if you've ever watched one of my episodes, you know what it is anyway. So yeah, what would the Lindsay, Emily, or Cherie of today tell the Lindsay, Emily, Cherie of yesterday when they were getting into mining? Like, what would the one piece of advice be that you would give yourself?
Be open to opportunities. So my background is in finance and accounting. I've been in finance and accounting for 16, 17 years. And now I'm the executive director of the Women's Mining Coalition. And I kind of do accounting. There's a business side to running this organization, and sure. But I mean, once I got involved in this organization and got more immersed into it, I fell in love with it. I've learned a lot about the mining industry myself, right? That just being a part of the organization comes with an education, itself. But I think be open to just any opportunities, and because this is how I've ended up here, and I really enjoyed it. So
yeah. Wonderful. Cherie?
It's a very small world in our sector.
Yeah.
And globally, it's tiny. So relationships matter a lot. And I think it's really important to foster those relationships, whether you're at university or a vacation student or a graduate, because those vacation student and graduate roles, you're going to come across those same people, and they might be your boss, you might be their boss in another 10 to 20 years. And if you have the luxury of being able to find a mentor that can chaperone you, I think there's a lot of value to mentorship as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great plug for hopefully a future episode. Is I was talking to somebody yesterday about what does mentorship mean and how does that come apart, and just like the good, the bad, the potential, all that other stuff that comes along with mentorship is definitely, if you can, and the intentionality behind it as well, both on the mentee and the mentor side on finding that right pairing. Mm-hmm. Emily, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, amen to everything Lindsay and Cherie said. Building your network in this industry is huge, and nobody likes to go to a cocktail hour and walk around and introduce themselves.
Lots of truth, yeah.
But it's very, very important. And yeah, you never know like what connection is going to take you where. And then the other thing I would tell myself, the 22-year-old who dove into a position in mining she probably was not qualified for, but convinced Kinross she was, is just don't be afraid to use your voice. I definitely was a sufferer of imposter syndrome for a very long time, and am a recovering imposter syndrome person. But you're in that room for a reason, and you have an important perspective, and the mining industry is honestly incredibly open to different perspectives. That's been something that has really helped me overcome that. Is everyone, folks want to hear it.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so very much for being with me today. I really appreciate your time. I hope to see you all at SME if I'm going. I'm certainly planning on it at this point. So hopefully we'll see you there. Hopefully I'll see you in Washington. That sounds like fun too. So, but I appreciate the time that you've taken today to talk to us, and I hope to have you back on too at some point.
Cool. Thank you so much, Maggie. It's been great.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.